And finally tonight, the analysis of Brooks and Marcus. New York Times columnist David Brooks, Washington Post columnist Ruth Marcus. Mark Shields is away tonight. David, the News of the World thing in Britain, Sarah Ellison said a few moments ago, told Ray that we're not immune from this. We, the United States and the American press, is not immune from this kind of stuff either. What do you make of it? What do you think about it?
Yeah, well, there are some ways the British press culture is very different from ours. It's more incestuous than ours. They all showered together at Eton, so they've been knowing each other since they were 8 years old.
That's a lovely image, David. Thank you.
So there's that. There's also sort of a bad boy ethos in some of the, especially the tabloid. We break the rules. We get the stories. We snoop. We're rats. And we don't quite have that kind of tabloid culture. But there are some dangers here, and which we should be aware of. First, prying. We pry. My first day on the job as a police reporter in Chicago, I'm 22 years old or whatever, a kid commits suicide, and I have to call all the neighbors and figure out why. So that's snooping. A guy dies, a mid-level city official dies. I have to get a quote out of his wife. That's snooping. That's what we do. But you hope you build some barriers so you're trying to get information without violating human decency. And then the second thing, which they refer to, is the incestuousness. We do try to get close to people who are powerful, who we write about, so we can get information. And the question is, are you then willing to make them angry? Is your loyalty to the paper rather than to your friendship with them? And that is a perpetual problem for all of us. But so I do think we don't have the same culture that they have in Britain, but we do have dangers.
You agree, Ruth?
Not entirely, because I think it's a very different situation here than it is there. And I hate to sound awfully, overly American chest thumping. But look, you cannot overestimate the degree to which Rupert Murdoch and his properties have an impact in the United Kingdom that is just so different from even his impact despite the influence of Fox News and the 8,000 Republican presidential candidates that are on their payroll here. He is so influential there. They own 4 out of 21 major newspapers. They have a major interest in, now want to gobble up the rest of the biggest private television network. It is critical for politicians in Great Britain to be on the good side of Rupert Murdoch, and that creates a whole set of dynamics that I don't think we have here. And simultaneously, look, there is cozying up there's good cozying up. If you don't have a relationship of trust and understanding with the people that you cover, you're not going to get accurate information from them. That's a good thing, but this goes way further. And also, there's a difference between what we've all had to do earlier in our careers, calling up the grieving parent and saying, how do you feel? And
hardest
hacking
thing
into,
I've ever had to do in my life.
It's terrible. And hacking into a cell phone. One is just repulsive and unethical.
But David's point is that it's not as there's not as big a gap there as you might think.
I'd say there's doorways. You have to walk, when you start as a journalist, you have to walk through some doorways. You have to walk up to strangers and ask them intimate questions.
That's right.
Most people are not used to that. But then there are several more doorways before you start doing the hacking.
Yeah.
So you've got to be aware of the successive doorways.
So you're saying our doorways are what?
It's a different culture. It's hard to imagine, even with TMZ and all the other places that paparazzi here, it's hard to imagine a scandal of similar proportions here in the United States, or at least that's my American story, and I'm sticking to it.
All right, and we'll hum a song and go on to what do you make of today's job numbers?
Pretty terrible, obviously. I guess to me, one of the things you take away is that we're constantly gotten this wrong. And I say we as sort of the economic consensus. There has been a view, first the administration saying that unemployment would be down at 7 or 8, then we had the summer of recovery, and then we had some real job growth, and then we had a lot of economists saying, even up until yesterday evening, that the job creation was going to be better. And it's just not there. And so one of the lessons I take away is we don't know much about the economy. And the second lesson I take away...
Nobody knows very much.
Yeah, nobody knows very much, and I think most economists would concede that.
Yeah.
And the second thing I take away is that we're just not really good, the government is not really good at manipulating quarter-to-quarter growth. The government can create the terms for long-range growth with human capital policies and good structures and good tax, but at boosting the economy from quarter to quarter, month to month, we just, especially with fiscal policy, just don't have that within our power.
Ruth, one of the things the president said today was that maybe one of the reasons for the fact that private business has not been hiring is that they're all worried about the debt limit vote. Do you buy that?
No, but any argument that can get to an agreement on the debt limit, I give some tolerance to. One of the things that's fascinating about the job numbers is that how you react to them and how you understand them within the context of the debt limit depends on what your pre-existing conceptions are. So that Republicans saw the terrible job numbers, and which are terrible, and said, well, this just shows that the last thing on earth that we can do is raise taxes and squelch the prospect of job creation. And Democrats saw it and said, this shows that we need to make sure that whatever we do in the short term, it doesn't, we can't cut spending and therefore cut growth, and we need to think about further stimulative things. So each side is going to take these numbers and use it to just make the same arguments that they would have made absent those numbers.
I just wish somebody would measure the magnitude of these effects. So cutting taxes, it probably does hurt growth a little. Does it hurt growth a lot? I kind of doubt it. Cutting spending, it probably hurts growth a little, but a lot. Hard to measure.
Raising taxes.
Raising taxes, yeah.
But you cut spending, government spending, people lose their jobs, and that's what those people were counted in today's unemployment.
Sure, you saw the biggest category of loss was government and state and local government. Duh. But the magnitude, the thing that I find so frustrating about the use of these job numbers in the context of the tax debate, the debt ceiling debate, is that people are not talking about massive tax increases now. We're talking about, and so yes, there is a magnitude, and we can disagree about how great it is about the impact of raising taxes. Nobody's talking about huge tax increases now. We're talking about the prospect of raising tax revenue over 10 years. And Lord knows if we're not out of this terrible economy in 10 years, we'd be sitting here in sackcloth and ashes.
What is your reading? What is your feeling, and what is your level of optimism about whether or not there's going to be a deal before August 2nd?
Well, let's put it this way. It's higher than it's been in about 5 years. And so I think if Boehner and Obama were in the room, they would have a deal already. And I think they've made...
You really believe that two of them are enough in sync?
Right. They would have a deal. And I think they've made significant progress in private. Now, there are a couple of things that are holding them back and which should make us a little more pessimistic. One, can they get Republicans to sign on to this deal? Boehner's clearly open.
You're talking about the Tea Party Republicans or all Republicans?
Well, the question is how big a chunk the Tea Party is, or what we might call the Michelle Bachmann rejectionists.
Okay.
That they're going to vote against the debt ceiling raising no matter what. They're going to vote against tax increase no matter what. How big are they? Then how big are the rejectionists on the left? And then how many tricks are they trying to play off against each other? The Obama and Boehner. There's some tricking going on. Nonetheless, I have to say, for those of us who've been waiting for the leaders of the two parties to have serious negotiations about big things, that is happening now. And overall, I think it's excellent news.
Wow. Do you agree with that?
I'm not quite as overly optimistic, exuberantly.
You're disagreeing with David
I
here.
know, and it pains me so much.
It's all right.
But when you ask if there's going to be a deal, I hate to sound Clintonian, but it depends on what the meaning of deal is. The White House has set out this sort of Goldilocks trifecta of deal possibilities. There's the little weeny tiny deal. There's the medium-sized $2 trillion deal.
You're talking $2 trillion, $3 trillion, $4 trillion,
or
right?
something like that.
Yeah.
And there's the big deal. The big deal is what gets David and me actually really revved up and excited. And there is a better prospect for that than there has been for a very long time, but I would still put the prospects of that at somewhere south of 50%.
Why are the prospects for the biggest deal better than for the medium deal or the little deal? What's happening?
Well, I'm not sure they're better, but the argument for the bigger deal and the reason that we might see a bigger deal is bigger isn't just better in this circumstance. It actually might be easier because you can trade off more different parts and more different constituencies. and the Republican, Boehner, in order to get his Republicans, needs some Social Security cuts, and so...
And that takes the Democrats
and then Democrats,
revenue.
and the Democrats need $1 trillion in tax revenue, and so maybe you can play around and make it look like less than $1 trillion, and then you whisper to your friends that it's actually $1 trillion. It's going to be... What's going on behind the scenes is absolutely fascinating. The oddest couple around is the president and the speaker. They are completely in sync in wanting to get this done. Everybody else, not so much.
Everyone else is miserable.
How do you explain that? What's happened to make Obama and Boehner be beyond just being golf partners?
The two things. One, I think they both seriously think the country has a problem, a deficit problem.
They agree that the debt limit, too, is a problem.
Right. And third, incumbents have mutual incentives. The party of the incumbents wants to get reelected. If Obama cuts a deal, he's very likely to get reelected. If Boehner changes the trajectory of spending, he can say, we came to Washington, we did it. And so secretly what's going on here is that Obama is really sticking the knife in Nancy Pelosi, making it unlikely that she's going to get the speakership. And Boehner, if he cuts a deal, is hurting Mitt Romney or whoever the Republican nominee is. And so the party of the incumbents are sticking together and hurting the party of the outs.
Wow. And in a word, do you agree?
I mostly agree.
You mostly agree. That's as far as we can go. Sorry, Ruth. Good to see you.
Nice to see you.